with another topic and new guests. As you know, we discuss lots of current issues, and especially from my experience around the community helping with their challenges. Without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest tonight. We have with us Sheikh Ahmed Haneef. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you much. I'm fine, sister. Thank you.
So lovely to see you again. And we also have our amazing Moulana Syed Razavi. Assalamu alaikum. How are you today?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm absolutely really honored to have both of you here today, and obviously having my teacher as well, Sheikh Haneef. Absolutely a pleasure. I want to go straight into this topic. It is something that has been bothering me for a while. I've had lots of people come around, generally, not just for myself, but generally hearing about this, where our communities are all for, equality when it comes to standing up for race and, bringing out that sort of way of being. But when it comes to our actual households, and especially in marriage, and even coming from our faith, practicing our faith, unfortunately, there is still the practice that we should marry only in our own background. And there are pressure from parents. There are even people that are putting that forward as an ideal situation when it comes to relationships, not even understanding if relationships even make an actual fulfilling sort of longevity when it comes to marrying from your own race. I've had many couples come to me with issues and challenges, and majority of them are from the same background. So that doesn't necessarily mean that having the same background actually adds to your relationship. There's a lot more to it. But if someone has preferences, that is absolutely fine. We know that we want to preserve what we need to after many generations of being here. But if there are all the boxes ticked for two individuals to get together, and there are still issues only because they come from a different background, what are your thoughts on this? I'd like to come to you first with this, Sheikh Haneef, with regards to this question of choosing somebody who is from a different background and it's not accepted only for that reason.
Right. I'm glad you added and it's not accepted for that reason, because I think this is one of the crucial defining aspects of what you would call racism, ethnocentrism. But before I continue, I'd like to say that it is a natural thing for people to marry within their own ethnic group. It's quite natural, not that I'm not saying that you should, you shouldn't. I'm just saying it's a natural thing, just as natural as men wanting to marry women that remind them of their mothers, and if that they had a good mother, of course, and girls wanting to marry men who remind them of their fathers somewhat subconsciously. It is because these people have been their role models of the male and female in their lives. And so they would want to, and they become a sort of an archetype for them, especially if you have like good parents and so on. You'd find people long after that parent is gone saying things like, my mother used to say and my father used to say and things like that. So it would be quite a normal, natural tendency for somebody to want to marry somebody who looks like that, or even somebody who belongs to their culture. Now, on that level, you find a lot of older generation immigrant parents, insisting upon this, upon marrying somebody from their own ethnic group. Right? Again, I don't think we could call it racism as such, because they might be, let's say, for example, a Bangladeshi family might be just as adamant about the children not marrying an Arab than to marry somebody white, for example, or black. You know what I mean? And you find that type of a preference has a lot to do with a strong desire to preserve the culture. And I think instinctively they know that one aspect of the culture is language. One of the things that these parents would use as a reason is like, well, how can I communicate with the children, for example, with the grandchildren? If I speak a different language to them, especially if that woman, for example, or that man, are not very proficient in English and so on. So these are also cultural dynamics. I think when we start to stereotype them or we label them and that type of stuff. I think it really interferes with us understanding these things outside of giving it a value. You know what I mean? But I think, when somebody says, I do not want my children ever to marry X group, and you'd find that among Arabs as well. You know what I mean? There's a lot of not really a lot, but there are certain Arabs who would not want non-Egyptians who will not want to be caught dead marrying an Egyptian, for example. I think this is some kind of ethnocentrism or some kind of racism, because the reasons that they might give to these are largely stereotype, are largely hearsay. When you say, I don't want my people to marry any one particular group, believe you me, it is because that person has heard negative stereotypes, which in themselves are racist, that leads them to this quote unquote rational choice. You see?
There is that, definitely. There's absolutely that. Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, the fact that you said what you said, it's actually given me so many questions on top of that. There is one part where they want to preserve. There is also the fact that they want to keep the similarities and to continue with, having same language, culture, things like that. But do you also think that there's also a sense of a little bit of ego, thinking that not just to preserve, but to preserve meaning that they are better in order to continue in that lineage? So at the same time, we as Muslims as well, when we have to consider this amongst our own faith backgrounds, now what sort of message is that giving even to outside our faith? Because we complain about being put in a particular sort of category. But if we're doing that to our fellow Muslims, that is quite dangerous too, and it's sending a message, as double message. I will come back to you, Sheikh Haneef, in a minute, but Syed Razavi, in our faith, does it have room to actually project that this is an ideal way of, having a relationship or a marriage, to actually marry from your own background? Because, I mean, again, if, say, a revert or someone listening to that, which I actually had someone listening to something like that, said, well, what about us? We're entering into this religion and this faith. And if that's been said about marrying your own background, how do we fit in?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, if you look at Islamic sources, verses of Holy Quran, and the action of Ma'asumin, we find that there are no, first of all, there are narrations to marry within your community, within your tribe, within your race, and there are also narrations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you in different tribes and races. You need to know each other and mix with each other. And there are narrations that if you want, and this is practically what our holy imams did. For example, when Fatima sallallahu alayha became martyred, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, instructed to look at the best of the Arab tribes who could bring a child like Abbas for her, for Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام. So, and also if you look at the practice of our Ma'asumin, we find them marrying all different races and backgrounds, and also they have married within family and cousins and within the same tribe. So what we can conclude is that it's not forbidden to marry within your family, and you are not restricted from marrying outside your family. So the criteria is piety, iman, understanding. Sometimes you find two cousins totally having a different understanding of everything in their life. Although they are cousins, but they are completely opposite to each other. And in cases we find that a person from totally different races and background and country and even a continent get together and manage to have a very successful and happy life together.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. I mean, relationships are based on not just having similarities within their culture. That is a very small part. Yes, it's maybe comfortable and easy to have the same food and language and wear the same clothes and have certain similarities in that way, but that doesn't necessarily make your relationship work. There is a lot more to it. And on top of that, I want to know about why are we, considered to still have this issue, because we have issues with outside our faith looking at us in a particular way, yet we do the same in our own sort of faith backgrounds between each other when it comes to marriage. And we will be a friend of somebody who is from another background, but we will not invite them as closely into our homes. In some families, it has to be within their own background and culture, and that is a strict requirement. And that's why I feel that we do need to raise this and give some clear answers about it, because there's a message not just within the community, but also a message outside the community as to how we even treat each other. What's your thoughts on this, Sheikh Haneef?
I think on the malevolent side, okay, there's a malevolent side here, and I think it's a minority of Muslims really, but
Really?
their numbers are quite high. I mean, they're still a minority, okay, and that side is one that, for example, has inherited the value system of the society in which they live, okay. And this value system says that certain people are not good people, okay, for whatever reasons. And they follow that and they apply that. You know, I know one mosque, for example, I won't give the city's name, where a number of Caribbean people converted to Shia Islam, and they started to come to the mosque on a regular basis. They were largely men, and people asked them eventually if they plan to sell marijuana in their mosque. Okay, where does this come from? This comes from the value system, the racist value system of the society in which they live. Okay, um, uh, this is a minority of people. The others, the biggest problem, and I think you have sort of hinted at it, is a generational control of the community. And that generational control of the community goes back about 2 generations. They're the ones who are on the board of the directors of the mosques, for example, at least in some number. You know, they're the ones who are, the trustees. You know what I mean? They're the ones who established the mosque or the center and so forth. And the whole ethos is to maintain a certain separate identity from the society. You go to these mosques and the language of intercourse is Urdu. You go to another one, is Arabic. You go to another one, is Farsi. What does that mean to a convert? What does that mean to somebody who is what? Literally an outsider. I know Iranians in this country who refer to non-Iranians as Khariji, as foreigners. They're in this country. They're foreigners.
aliens.
You know what I mean?
They
Right? But they
translated
call
from
non-Iranians foreigners.
alien.
Okay? What's that? What's that saying?
Yeah, they call them aliens, like I'm in American language.
Yeah, they're living in this country. It tells you their reality. Okay? Their reality is highly subjective. Okay? Right? Once you have these types of attitudes, you cannot encourage these types of marriage in your community. You can't. You see? It'll be easier to go to Iran as a non-Iranian man and get married to somebody over there, a woman over there, and get citizenship. That's how easy it is. It's not that easy. Okay, I'm just trying to show you how difficult, right? But I'm saying that this is something that you find in all of these different communities, and once our centers remain cultural centers, okay, for one culture, okay, I think this will continue. You know,
That is a very
and when I say
important point.
one culture, when I say one culture, I mean a center should encourage the multicultural nature of the Muslim community. You know, it should have programs for Arabs to learn Arabic, young kids to learn Arabic, and young kids to learn Urdu, and young kids to learn Farsi, you know, and Pushtun and all these other different languages. You should have that. You should encourage people to celebrate Eid in according to their own cultural pattern. This is beautiful, you know, and to encourage other Muslims from other cultural patterns to come to that Eid and so forth. This is something very beautiful. What I've noticed in the Sunni community is much more integrated.
Yes.
Okay, the Shia community is still more fragmented on the basis of ethno-cultural lines. You know, and I think this is the major problem, why you find that they're still insular in their thinking and so resistant to inter-ethnic marriage.
No, you've highlighted some amazing points, and it does lead back to our centres being quite segregated with regards to ethnicity and background. And that's why in the homes and the households, they continue in the same way. But even intellectuals, professionals, you know, living in the West, living in this day and age, will still continue in that way. And we are taught to actually, educate ourselves, not just with the secular education, but the Islamic education. And at the end of the day, as much as we quote what we quote, when it comes to our own families and homes, we don't necessarily think that, we still want to preserve, we still want to. And I get the fear, I get the fact that we need to do things, and I get we have preferences. That is absolutely correct. But when two people want to get together and the only issue is that of race, and that is denied, then it's a problem. Or if people are speaking about relationships and thinking that marrying in your own background is what actually leads you to longevity in that relationship, that is definitely not correct. Because majority of people that actually do get divorced from the Muslim community, as we know, they do come from the same background. So it doesn't matter, even if it's from the background or not. You know, there are so much more wider issues to be discussed in relationships. And the least of it is to say that what's going to keep you together and what's going to make you have a good relationship is marrying from your own background. So, I mean, that would be obviously
points that they made. You know, a couple of points that they made there, I think it might require some clarification. I don't think there's a segregation that is taking place. You know, I mean, these centers are open to everybody, okay, but they have a cultural agenda, you know, and they believe that they're open to everybody. Everybody can come there and pray. Everybody can come to their programs. You might be able to understand the program, but the door is open. Yeah, they don't really care if you understand the program or not either.
Definitely.
You know what I'm saying? I remember going to one Urdu program when I just became a Muslim, you know, and I'm sitting there, I don't understand one thing of what's going on. I then look over to me and smile and say, "Do you understand what he's saying?" It was almost a joke.
It is really, you might laugh at it, Sheikh, but I've seen so many people that come to me, especially as women reverts, and they are looking for marriages, and they're looking to settle, they're looking for family, they come into the faith to actually join the community. The Muslim community is so open, it's so beautiful, it's so welcoming. We have a color of languages and, so many different things. But I think at the end of the day, if we are talking in these terms
about marriage, I'd be careful. If I was them, I'd be careful. I tell you, if I was a woman convert, okay, and one of these ethnic Muslims want to marry me, I will be very careful. Okay, I'd be careful about getting into an abusive relationship. I will be careful about that because it happens in the Muslim community. Okay, I'll be careful as a Western woman who is accustomed to a certain type of, let's say, I don't want to say the word freedom. I hate using the word freedom. A certain type of independence. Okay, and a sense of responsibility over their own environment and stuff like that. Coming into an area where, for example, the man's mother or aunt wants to make her her servant. I'd be very careful about that. I'd be really careful if I was a woman going into a relationship like this, especially if the man doesn't want to give me the right of divorce. Okay? For him to start, and I've met this type of stuff, for him to start imagining what kind of life she had before she became a Muslim and how many people she might have slept with. oh yes, this kind of stupid stuff is happening, I would be very, very careful. You know, it is not just a simple question, okay, of, let's say, suitability. And it's not that about simply, well, yeah, two people love each other and commit to each other, you know, and want to go together. No, right? It's people who are self-conscious, okay? You know, people who belong to this culture, basically, I tell you. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of these ethnic-based marriages don't work, because they think it is a better priority to get some innocent cousin from Lahore and bring them over here to get married, okay? And you have so many problems coming up with that. People whose kids are homosexual, they want to get them married to some sucker in England. You know what I mean? So they could maybe get cured and all these type of nonsense. All right? You know, so it's
There's a
all
lot
these
of
type of things. I have to be very, very
there's a
careful.
lot of issues. There's a
Very
lot of
careful.
issues. But what you raised is that we are actually again living more culturally based than we are Islamic based. Syed Razavi,
Oh,
what
definitely.
is your
Definitely.
yeah, that's why I'm raising this, because when we are actually trying to promote more of, you know, being around culture and even saying that that's the
Yeah.
best way and the way forward even for marriages, then that's why it actually, you know, distances us from even people entering into our
Yeah.
religion, as well as people who are living it in a cultural way that takes advantage over that culture, which does not actually match our faith. What is your
Yeah.
insight on that, Said Rizvi?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
That's fine. I'll
we
come back.
need to educate and give the training to our community members. And only a few
And
days
these are
ago, I
educated
mentioned it to
people that are saying that, Sayed. What if, like, you know, an educated leader or scholar or even someone who's studied Islam who may be saying that, you know, when it comes to our marriages, it is a better way to choose our own background. How would you even address that?
I would address differently, because I don't believe that we should force our children to marry in a religion or in a racial background that we choose. Of course, we have to abide by the Islamic restrictions. For example, Islam teaches us not to give our daughters to non-Muslims. So that's a Quranic verse. We cannot go against the verse of Holy Quran. But there is no restriction in educating another person about Islam and bringing them into Islam. And you can get double reward. First, you guide someone else to the right path, and also you establish a family which is ignoring the racial discrimination and racial differences between them. And I usually say that look at the life of our holy imams. I mean, they had Iranian wives, they had European wives, they had African wives, they had Arabs, and within Arab also they had different tribes and racial background. They did not stick to only Sayyids. I mean, unfortunately, in our community there is especially amongst this is the belief that Sayyid should marry only Sayyid, which is wrong. I mean, practice of Imams and practice of Maraj Taqlid is against that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Said Rezavi. I want to come back to you quickly before we end. We have got, you know, a few minutes left, Sheikh Haneef, and we are wanting to obviously create integration, you know, within communities. And marriage is one way of doing that. And I understand, again, the fear of people not knowing what they're going to have when they marry into a different background. But ideally, like you said, people are different and they don't know what they're going to get regardless. It's a lot more about compatibility, values, and that way, the way in which that person looks at life and views life. But if someone is actually saying that you cannot marry another from another background, regardless if they're a good Muslim, is that racist?
I think if they are good Muslims and if they have cultural compatibility, right? Cultural compatibility involves things like shared value system. Okay, and I'm talking about it in the positive sense of the word. I don't believe that Western cultural oriented people can easily marry and have a successful marriage with an Eastern culturally conditioned person. I think it's going to be very difficult, especially when religion is involved. You know, I think it. You know, you need to have cultural compatibility, and I think the new generation of Muslims are expressing that. New generations of Muslims find more in common with other ethnic groups than they have with their own the generation of their own parents. You know, so they are more open to these types of marriages just simply because of the fact that they exist here. You know, and the ones who are more corrupt are attracted to the corrupt, and the ones who are more pious, their type of religion is one that is in reaction and is in struggle with the society. Yeah, they'd find a lot of compatibility here.
I'm glad you said
so I think
that.
it's something
When it
natural.
comes,
It's an evolution. I think it's an
absolutely,
evolution, and I think we can hasten it.
if there was one advice that you would give someone who is struggling right now, because I have a lot of cases where they do come to me, and especially for reverts who want to get married, and they may not even know the culture, but they actually have the values and they've learnt to a certain extent the faith. And they do want to marry a Muslim man. But if that Muslim man's family is saying that you cannot marry anybody but your own background, what would you sort of guide in that sort of direction?
I think he has to. Yeah, I think he has to resolve that first. You know what I mean? Because in Islam, you marry a family. You don't just marry the person. There's no individual kind of you and me love each other and we get a one bedroom apartment together and later for everybody else. It's not like that. You know what I mean? A marriage brings two families together. And if his family is adamant against it and so forth, I would not recommend a Romeo and Juliet type of a relationship. I would recommend that if they love each other strongly enough to weather that storm, they have to get their parents and everybody else on board. I think
That
that's
is
the
so
first step.
No, I think that really does end nicely. And thank you so much for your time and insights. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Sheikh Haneef, for your time, as well as Syed Razavi. And we may have to revisit this again another time because you've raised so much more. Thank you so much, dear viewers, for watching. We're only raising these topics tonight only so that we can have more understanding. Yes, you have preferences and you are more than, okay to marry within your own background. And it's really amazing that we do have that, but we do have options and we do have to consider how even the outsiders do look at us. If we don't want anything against us, especially in the media, then we have to also be fair as to how we're choosing in our homes and our households. And marriage is an amazing, sacred, sort of system and unit where I think what Sheikh Haneef has ended with to say that even if you two are compatible in the sense that you both want it, family involvement is really, really important. As much as they may not even agree that you have chosen someone outside, we do need to resolve things in our household. I like to raise thought-provoking topics, not to harm anyone, but just for us to open up our thinking and our mind so that we can have better ways of living together with each other and actually have the integration in the right way. And remember, relationships are not going to just work because you come from the same background. That is, a bonus to a certain extent, but it's so much more when it comes to relationships. And I think that we need to consider that as well. We have to take into, the value system, the background in more ways than just the ethnicity. That's what I want to say. And also the fact that as Muslims, we are open in a sense that we are inviting to different cultures and backgrounds, and we need to be inviting in our homes as well. And hopefully for the parents that are finding it difficult for inviting people in their households for marriage that is not in the same sort of like ethnicity and background, then we also need to consider why is that? and maybe have better relationships in our mosques and centers and friendship groups even, so that we can have better understanding and build that bridge and gap that is existing up till today, which makes us continue speak and act in this way, which is creating more division. So inshallah, I hope that this has only opened up more sort of like thought-provoking ideas in your mind, and to hopefully create better relationships within the families, especially when there are different choices, so that we can have much more stronger units. Because our society is something that we need to preserve, not just by having the same background, but by having the same mindsets, and the mindset which is more about our faith than it is about the culture. Thank you so much for watching. Inshallah, we will be back next week with another topic and guest. And